where we lived, we had Jewish people in the town, and we also had Jewish people in our barn. We consider ourselves Hungarians. I was born in Hungary, I was raised in Hungary. The only thing that was missing, I didn't speak Hungarian, but my mom and dad did speak Hungarian. But at home, we spoke German. The town that we lived near was Erdenburg, and in Hungary it's called Sopron Bánfalva. So we lived maybe about 7-8 kilometers outside of the town. Okay, I'd say we're probably the northeast of it. Okay, they don't have the farms like we have over here. Here, people live on the farm. The people in Germany, they lived at home and went out to the farm. They lived in a village, but they all had certain acreages outside of town. If they had anything within the village, they had a barn. And so therefore the Germans used our barns to store the Jews in. And I can tell you, every day there were 3 or 4 of those Jews that were dead. And they'd carry them out, and I see them, you know. And that's what I remember. I remember seeing them on the road. I remember seeing being 3 or 4 of them every morning being carried out, the dead, and they carried them. I don't even know where they buried them, but somewhere over there they buried them. They had a graveyard, whatever. I don't know where they went, but you know, they carried them through town. It wasn't just us. It was every farmer that had a barn. And as many as fit in there. And they would also, as far as cleanliness, they'd have to do their business in the barn and then carry it out with their hand. And of course, every day that those Jews died, they brought more in. I heard many people say, that didn't happen over there, you know. That's a bunch of hogwash, you know. Well, I'll tell you what, I seen it. And I seen those Jews. And in fact, whenever they were persecuting the Jews, I still remember them going through the streets, just in droves, one after the other. And they were all, now the only thing they had anymore was a Star of David. But the Germans used the Jews for labor. And whatever it was that they did, road work mostly, you know. And so keep the roads clean and keep them whatever. They were so happy to sit down with kids because they couldn't do them any harm. And then they would just draw pictures of them, you know. But like I said, the ones that I remember that were in occupied our barns back here were very, very artistic, you know. They were, you know, they I don't know what they were in their profession before or whatever. I'm sure they had stores, jewelry stores, whatever, okay. And notoriously, we're always told the Jews had a lot of jewelry stores, you know, and that they were crooks, you know. That was always taught. That was always brought down, you know. This was, quote, the excuse that the Germans used to persecute them and to drive them together and they drive them together. They couldn't survive with the amount of food they fed them because they didn't feed them much. You know, the most food those Jews got was from farmers around like we. You know, they were sympathetic, like my mom. I can't tell you where all they came from. I mean, I never got personal with them. You know, whatever. The personal contact I had was the fact that they liked to draw. They like to get kids like us back here, you know, and draw the picture. And you go home and give it to mom and dad, and they feel sorry to give you something to give them, you know. But you weren't allowed. You were caught doing that. That the rule was you're part of their concentration camp. My mom had a very soft heart. She was very compassionate, and she felt very sorry for the Jews. So the Jews were always knocking on her door. And the rules were that if you were caught giving anything to the Jews, and my mom always gave them a morsel here, morsel there, you know, whatever. They always offered to do things for her in order to get some food, just to survive. In a town that's no bigger than 3,000 or 4,000, it's very hard to keep a secret over here from anybody. So everybody knows everybody's business, you know. Doesn't matter how many friends you have, you always have enemies as well. And so therefore, I don't know how it came about. Somebody didn't like the fact that she gave him food, you know what I mean? And then somebody squealed. And it has to be more than squealing. It has to be complaining and bring it to the front, you know. And that's what happened. So the SS, the hierarchy, I still remember his name was Winter, last name Winter. But they caught Mom, and then of course the thing is, if you get caught, you're thrown into their concentration camp. That's how the rules went. And then of course that would have probably happened if it wasn't for my grandfather. My grandfather, he was the burgomaster of the town, and he had connections here and there and there and there. And so he had to go out there to clear my mom so she didn't end up in a concentration camp. But that's as close as we came, you know, with her. People don't understand that. They say, well, you know, why you do this and why you do that and so on, whatever. Well, people don't understand how things were at that time, you know. I mean, a rule was a rule, you know, and if you broke the rule, you're going to pay for it, you know, especially with the SS in charge, you know. My grandfather, he was friends with everybody, even with the Russians. The Russians came through town, you know, everybody fearing them. Hell, he'd invite them to the house and he'd give them all the damn wine they want. And you know what they did? They went out and stole and brought it back to my grandfather. I mean, they brought like speck, you know, speck is a bacon, you know. They went out there and they stole off of other people and they brought it back to my granddad. It's just about, but like I said, my grandfather was a people's man, you know what I mean? He was friends with the Russians, he was friends with the whoever came through. But we had a Russian officer. She was a captain. She also stayed at our house. Larissa Opedina Larissa.
And she liked you.
She liked me. And she used to take me on, and she had a group of friends, her clique. They were mostly also women, and they liked to go out on Sundays and picnic. And then she used to take me on her picnics. She bought me a ball, a soccer ball, and stuff like that.
Wow.
And this was a Russian captain. My dad was by profession a bricklayer. He was recruited into the Hungarian army. The Hungarian army was thrown together with the German army at the end when everything was going to hell. And that's when my dad was killed. And the only reason we know that my dad was killed because one of the people from our town knew my dad, and he saw them when they were carrying him off. And he came back and he testified. A lot of people didn't know what happened to their relatives or the soldiers, whatever. But like I said, the Hungarian army was used by the German army for their purpose. When everybody was losing, then nobody gave a hoot anymore. Whoever was left, they came back home. And I just know my dad never made it back home. So the only evidence that we have that he said he was out there retrieving one of his friends when he had him over his shoulder when he got a hard shot and fell on top of him. That was it. But at least we had peace of mind in knowing what happened to our dad. Many people still to this day don't know what happened. The Hungarians and the Russians, mainly Russians, that wanted to drive out the German-speaking population so that they would have less problems. They wanted to get rid. And how did they get rid of them? Send them to Germany. I was on a train to God knows where with 7 other families in a cattle car. Don't know where you're going, just there. We had no choice. We had no choice. You ended up here. Who asked you if you wanted to go be here? Matter of fact, you had nothing to compare it with, so you're glad to be somewhere. And once you got on that train, they didn't give a damn where the hell you ended up at, where you. And we, like I said, nobody knew. Train stops here, and they left our list, so-and-so, get off here, so-and-so, and the train went on and dropped off some more, some more people. And so wherever, we were 7 days on that train, I remember. And I had my birthday, I forgot now which one, but I was 21st of April, and I was 7 years old on that train. So you had no choice in that matter. You didn't get to choose, well, no. They read off who's in this car, and who's this car, and that car. They closed the car doors, and off you went. And after 3 days on the road, they opened up the doors. And I still remember it was along the Danube. Everybody was so happy just to get out and walk around. And then you know what I remember about there more than anything? I remember seeing tons and tons. You know what rosin is?
Yeah,
the stuff. The stuff that they use to put on violin strings.
Yeah.
I saw tons and tons of that, just stockpiled over there, where we got off on a train. I don't know what, and you know what we did? We used it for firewood, because rosin burns good. And also, you had to watch yourself when you walked around, because you saw a lot of the ammunition piles and everything left back by the Germans as they were driven out. So you have to watch, step on a hand grenade. We had several kids, in our area that, you know how kids are. They get a grenade and they play around with it, blew themselves up, and got killed. We got 4 or 5 of them, I remember. And when you were told, don't touch any, and there were ammunition piles just all over the place. If you wanted a Luger, no problem. But the thing is, like I said, you weren't interested in Luger. You were looking for food. The only thing you were interested in at that time was the leave from one day to the next. You weren't interested in material matters. My train ended up in Mosbach, Baden. In Baden is a state in Germany, okay? And I would say the closest city that I would say we lived between Stuttgart and Heidelberg. Heidelberg was to the south and Stuttgart to the north. We lived there, and of course, you know how people are from a certain area. Villages, word of mouth, they keep in touch with each other. My dad had a cousin here in America, a woman. She was not her cousin, she was a second cousin. And she was married and she had cancer. And she died of cancer. She had passed away and he was living by himself. The gentleman who became my stepfather, Mr. Gruber, got wind of the fact that my father was killed in the war. So soon we got a letter, Ms. John Gruber and everything. My wife was your husband's cousin. And they wrote to each other about 3 years. It took about 3 years until we finally got clearance to come to America. Because you don't just get on there and say, hey, you want to come to America? So it took some time until finally he made a proposal. He proposed that we come to America, and his intention would be to marry my mom. Never having seen her, knowing nothing about her, knowing only that his wife was a cousin of second cousin to my father. He wanted us to come to America with no strings attached. If we decided to like it, we could return. We were apprehensive, you going to America isn't just like going a boat and whatever, and meeting somebody you never met before, and having another family or whatever. It's no little thing, Everybody that my mom talked to in the village, they were all encouraging. They said, what have you got to live for here? I said, you have nothing to live for. The only thing you have here is food stamps and everything. You don't have a life, And so they kept talking, and eventually, and she, of course, if it wasn't for me, I don't think she would have come. But I talked to her into it. I said, well, Mom, what have we got to lose, I said, if we don't like it, we come back to Germany, Let's go. So at least we have a nice trip. Then in 1950 is when we came, and it was in May. The name of the ship was SS Washington. Never been on the ocean before, never been on a boat like that. We went from Germany, we went from Mosbach to Hamburg. From Hamburg is where we picked up the SS Washington. And I still at that time had a German hat. In France, we came through in Paris. The guy from over there, he saw it, and he slaps me on the head, and he goes, Heil Hitler! And that's the only bad experience I had. I shrugged it off, what the hell. It's one of those things you experience, and you go on, Nobody explained to me the significance of the Statue of Liberty. It was just a statue. Okay, I saw it. To me, it didn't mean anything. Statue. What the hell's a statue? So what? Always go. So what? What the hell? What is it? Nobody explained to me.
Not the answer I was expecting.
There were some hecklers, some people, that didn't like the Germans. But for most of all, I would say most of the people that I had contact with, they all liked me. They all liked Germans. I never had any complications of being called out, of being a Nazi or anything like that, whatever. Met Mr. Gruber, John Gruber, became my stepfather. And matter of fact, they asked me if I wanted to change my name to Gruber, Me being a stubborn old German, I said, no, I'm going to say Schwenk. So I stood, but he had no problems with that. He was very nice, and he was, we got along as a family. I had a real good chemistry teacher when I was in high school. His name was Mr. Gill, okay? And I always enjoyed it. Every time I always enjoyed his class. I couldn't wait to get to his class. He made it interesting, and I always wanted to pattern myself after him. So therefore, he had a genuine interest in students. It wasn't something put on. Some teachers go in and they just put in the time because, quote, they have to. Well, I never felt that way. I was wanting to enjoy myself. Every day was different. I taught 5 years at Walsh University, okay? Before that, I taught 8 years in public school. But I went public school, I went back and I got my doctorate degree. And then I went back and I taught at Walsh. And Bob Austin stopped over to see me, and he asked me if I was interested in teaching down at Tusky Valley. And I said, oh, I don't know, Tusky Valley, whatever, I'm teaching here at Walsh, why should I teach at Tusky Valley, I thought about it, and and Bob, he'd stop over occasionally. He didn't just stop at one time. So he always wanted to know, well, I'm ready to come down and teach down at Tusky Valley. So finally I said, yeah, I tell you, I think I'm ready. I think if you have an opening. So that was it. So my first day at Tusky Valley, I considered myself having the best students all the time. I honestly can say I have always been privileged to have students that wanted to teach, that wanted to learn. And being at Tusky Valley, to me, was no different than being at Walsh. No, it wasn't. You say, well, the grade. No, the challenge was the same. You had a challenge there to teach those kids chemistry. You had a challenge there to teach those kids physics. You give me one profession where you have the diversity of material on a daily basis besides teaching. You give me one. I could have gone in industry. I could have gone in the lab. Been a lab in it. But, if I'd have done that, I'd have probably ended up doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, and it would become monotonous. But with teaching, because the students are different, and you're teaching different types of students, that makes the difference. It doesn't matter whether I taught in high school or whether I taught in college. I always had interesting students, and I always had students that were willing. That's a big thing. If a student is willing to learn, you can do a lot. I started teaching in 1962. 202 that I retired. After I got married, went back with my honeymoon. I went back here, and matter of fact, I probably enjoyed that more than anything because I was growing up and I was able to had a little bit of money saved up and everything. I did. I had to go back. I had to go back and see it again. And, sad thing about it, nothing changed. Everything, no new structures built. Having, and going through all that, World War II and all that, actually, you learn a lot by having different experiences, that you normally never would have, But the most awful thing that I remember, in Germany was just living from day to day, having enough food, being poor, You learn what poor really means if you have to live it. You don't know. I don't say, I just laugh at these people over here calling themselves poor. To me, there isn't anybody voluntarily being poor in America. Because you have 2 feet. As long as you have 2 feet, 2 hands, a good mind, and you can sell yourself, you can go out and get a job and be fruitful and support yourself. You don't have to be dependent on your parents. We take for granted that most of the people in the world live, quote, like we do, you know. In Germany, if I were still living over there, I'd probably be doing the same thing that my dad was doing. I'd probably be a bricklayer. I would never have had the dream of being a teacher or anything else. Never, ever. Period. Done. And that's one of the differences over here, that here in America, we live with it every day, and we become so ingrained in it that we just accept it to be a part of an entitlement, you know. It isn't an entitlement, you know. I never really had any problems. I never had anybody tease me or whatever, or hold it against me that I was German. I never had that happen to me, you know. I always appreciated people, and I always treated people like people, you know what I mean? You do that, you're going to be treated like people.